Hi, this is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor and your leverage for change. Today I want to speak to you about the anxious, preoccupied attachment style, but I want to kind of come to it from two different perspectives. I want to speak to you about the anxious, preoccupied in relationship with different attachment styles and how they interact in these with these different individuals from different attachment styles. So the first thing you need to know about the anxious preoccupied attachment style is that this attachment style was formed early in childhood when there was an inconsistency in the care given to them by their caregivers. So there was a time when, there are times rather when they can depend on their caregivers to be there for them, and then there are other times when the caregivers are nowhere to be found, or it could be that there is one parent who is very loving, and then there is one parent who is very cold. And so the inconsistency between those two parents, as a child, you just cannot understand that, and you process it as not being loved and being wanted. And so the child is always in experiencing a feeling of a possibility of being abandoned, because they're not really ever sure of if their caregiver will be there for them when they need them. So one of their core wounds is abandonment. They fear abandonment, and so because of this fear that always comes up in relationships, they carry this by the way, this attachment style right into their intimate or romantic relationships, and also almost like expect the same treatment from their partner as they did as they received from their caregivers. So there's always this anxiety around relationships, and this feeling of maybe that they're going to be abandoned by their partners, and also that they're always fearful, and they overcompensate in relationships. They overdo to make sure that they're doing everything. It's almost like they're trying to do everything possible not to lose this partner, because they are afraid that if they mess up, the person might leave. So with that that frame, using that as a framework, using that as a framework from which to kind of experience this, let's look at the anxious preoccupied with another attachment style. Say, for example, the secure. As you know, the secure is someone who their parents were consistent in giving them care, so they developed a very secure attachment style, and they were able to be there for people. They were able to feel they didn't have a problem in feeling vulnerable with their partner. They were able to tell them really things that may be very private to them, and be able to open up, be open and loving and giving, and give them the love that they need, right? The next attachment style is the fearful avoidant. Now, well, let me go with the dismissive avoidant, because then the fearful avoidant will make more sense. The dismissive avoidant is someone who their caregivers basically kind of left them to raise themselves, basically. They were just not there for them when they needed them, and they just kind of found ways. They equated love or relationships or anything like that in emotional closeness with pain, and so they do not trust relationships, and so and worse, they cannot they find it very difficult, I should say, to be emotionally transparent with their partner or vulnerable to their partner, because they feel that if they do that, they will hurt them, and that's painful, right? Then the fearful avoidant now is even more complex, because they inhabit both the fearful of the dismissive avoidant strategies of being cold and distant because they're protecting themselves, as well as the anxious, preoccupied traits of being needy and anxious in relationships. So they have both spectrums. So you can understand how complicated and how difficult it is to be in that position, right? So now what happens is that for the anxious avoidant, the anxious preoccupied, when they are in relationship with someone who is secure, their triggers of feeling needy and like they might be abandoned or unloved and unworthy, those are not usually triggered, because the secure individual is able, they have the ability to freely love them, give them the affection they need. And if they start getting anxious, they feel they're good at, just consoling them and saying, making them feel protected, right? So the anxious preoccupied can heal when they are in a relationship with somebody who is secure and their anxiety is not easily triggered. They may still have to work on some things. This is anxious preoccupied, but the securely attached person has the capability to handle that, even though it should not be on them to be able to handle that. The anxious preoccupied person should also work on themselves to get to that point where they trust that this person is different than their caregivers, and then should not expect that they're going to abandon them or that they're unworthy or whatever it is, or cheat on them or whatever it might be. When an anxious preoccupied is in relationship with the dismissive avoidant, who is usually cold, secretive, distant, somebody who does not cannot express emotions or tolerate intense emotions, otherwise they leave, they disappear, because they just cannot tolerate any kind of intensity, emotional intensity. So if you're in a relationship, if an anxious preoccupied is in a relationship with somebody who is dismissive avoidant, they are going to be triggered every single day. They call and they don't hear, because a dismissive avoidant really doesn't care to respond to people very quickly. They're just not that emotional. They don't have that emotional intensity, or even that emotional, there's this word that I can't figure out, to emotional intelligence, I should say, to be able to pick up on cues, right? So somebody might need them to do something and they cannot see it. You have to basically tell them what is, what you're feeling, and also not only what you're feeling, but how they should react to you. That's very difficult in a relationship, but that's how emotionally they just cannot do emotional stuff, right? They can't they're not able to pick up on cues of emotional cues, and they can't express it. It's difficult for them to express emotion. So they're not going to be the lovey-dovey one holding your hands, cuddling you, or whatever it may be. As a matter of fact, they're going to want to sit over there in a corner or somewhere, or be away from you, and they're going to want to take their time by themselves on a regular basis, right? So this is what is going to trigger the anxious preoccupied, because this kind of response to their anxiety is going to even make it worse. So usually, of course, that relationship is very toxic and very painful for the anxious preoccupied, not necessarily for the dismissive avoidant, because they don't feel that kind of emotional intensity like the anxious preoccupied attachment style individual does. Also, now imagine an anxious preoccupied in a relationship with a fearful avoidant who has both traits of the dismissive and the anxious. So in a relationship with the anxious preoccupied, a fearful avoidant would be good. They can follow the cues and they understand the emotional cues, and they will talk to you for a long time, and they will cuddle you, and they want that closeness and all that sort of stuff. And after a while, if they feel that they're doing too much, because the fearful avoidants, have a tendency to people please, because it's how they dealt with their caregivers when they were young. They would do everything they wanted just to be safe. That's how they kept safe, because if they did what they should and really do above and beyond pretty much, then they feel that they can be safe, and they won't trigger their caregivers to hurt them or harm them. And so in a relationship, they will people please and really go overboard to do things. But after a while, if they keep doing that over and over again, and say, for example, the other partner does not reciprocate or say thank you and make them feel as if it's they're valued, then they can get very angry, and they'll hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in until they just explode, and they can become very volatile. And at that time, they will retreat and disappear, and they're the ones who will shout a lot. And so in this kind of relationship, the dynamic is like a hot and cold. You'll hear people describe some of those relationships, their relationships, as being hot and cold, right? With the dismissive avoidant, who's always mostly cold, is usually just very distant and cold. It's almost as if the other partner does not really exist until they feel like bringing them into their little circle. So the other problem is with, for example, the other interaction I can mention here is a fearful avoidant with the dismissive avoidant. The fearful avoidant, remember, has those two polar opposite sides, the anxious and then the cold and distant, right? Just like the anxious, preoccupied, and the dismissive avoidant. They have both traits, the fearful avoidants do. And so what they, with a dismissive avoidant, they will overplay their anxious part of themselves. The anxious, because they're being the dismissive avoidant is cold, right? And so their anxiety is more triggered by all of that. So they're in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant. A fearful avoidant is more, they act out more like the anxious preoccupied, because they cling, they're needy, they're very careful that they're not doing anything wrong to offend the other person. So I hope that kind of gives you, I know I went very fast, but I speak fast when I get excited. So I know I went very fast and kind of but it was really just, I wanted to give you the overview of kind of how each attachment style would react to each other, basically. And oh, by the way, guys, the secure attachment style, even though they are secure and they're able to do all of that, if they got into a relationship with a dismissive avoidant or a fearful avoidant, they can also almost like become triggered as well. So it is very important in the dating process, in the dating timeline, when we're dating or when you're dating, that you see, look for these behaviors, right? Because even if you're secure, you can be triggered, not to the extent of the anxious preoccupied, but you will be triggered and do certain things that you would never do normally, because this person is withholding love. They're cold, they're distant, they're, so these are things that you have to be careful about when you're dating, that you watch out for these signs before to see if these are people, this is someone that you could actually, who you could have a conversation with, who can give you the love, give you what you need. It's really what you need. Everybody's going to need something else. The anxious preoccupied needs to feel that love. The securely attached also needs that love, not to the extent of the anxious preoccupied. But the important thing is, guys, to know what you need, look for what you need. Don't try and sugarcoat it or embellish it when you see something going that you don't like to see and say they will change. People don't normally change unless they want to. So you have to be very careful to choose, look at what you see right now and see it for what it is, basically. So guys, this is Christine, your relationship and mindset master doctor and your leverage for change. Have a great day. Bye-bye.